Hello, everybody. We're at the top of the hour. So I would like to take this moment to introduce Ryan Vandenbroeck, who is the practice group research liaison at Troutman Pepper. He was previously with Baker McKenzie as a research librarian before becoming the research librarian supervisor. He has a storied history of being a research analyst, and he even had a stint with a media company doing market research analyzing. Welcome, Ryan. He is going to be speaking on the practice group liaison role in the modern library firm. I can speak. I cannot. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, April. Thank you, NoCal, for having me. Thank you to Bianca for accepting my proposal. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hopefully it comes through. I think it's coming through now. I hope it's coming through. Let me make sure I can see everybody here.
Yeah, you were doing great.
Everybody can see me? Okay. So yes, thank you for that introduction. Again, for anybody who doesn't know me, or maybe it's been a while, my name is Ryan Vandenbroeck, and I am a practice department research liaison at Troutman Pepper. I work out of the San Francisco office, and I am here today to talk about the practice liaison role in the modern law firm library. I'm going to speak to my experience working in law firms. Hopefully, everybody here from all sorts of different law libraries will have something that they can take out of this. I think there's going to be a lot of different applicable things for everybody. But I guess just some quick background. Thank you, April, for providing that background to start things off. But again, I've worked primarily for two firms. I started in law libraries in 2006. I've worked out of two different offices in both of those firms, Silicon Valley office, San Francisco office in both those firms. I started many years ago as a library technician, moved over to a researcher role, moved over to a resources role, moved over to a research supervisor role, did some more research work, and now I am a practice liaison. So as you can tell, I've worn a lot of hats in these past 18 years, and I've seen a lot of changes in law libraries in these past 18 years. And I know a lot has changed even before that. But just in my time, I can think back to when I first started, and the firms that I worked for and the firms that I would go and visit all had these beautiful stacks of printed materials, regularly updated binders with loose leaf updates, and the hardcover books with the pocket parts. We all remember those. And these shelves, I look at this picture of these shelves, and it makes me, happy. It makes me calm. It makes me think back to those days working in those nice print libraries. But of course, technology changes. And at one point, books were the best technology available to do research, to do legal research. And then CD-ROMs came out, and CD-ROMs made things a little bit easier. And we would have CD-ROMs and sleeves in the back of these books, or maybe we would have CD-ROMs sitting on their own on these shelves. And then electronic materials came out, online electronic materials came out, and we started doing searches in those online electronic materials. And it's not just the technology that's changed. I feel like when I first started, the law firm had gravitational centers in offices, right? Each office was its own gravitational center. People would go to the office 5 days a week and would see each other and develop relationships with attorneys and with staff in those offices 5 days a week. And things have changed, obviously. With COVID, we're not coming into the office 5 days a week anymore. Some of us aren't coming into the office at all. And there are other reasons why we're not really seeing the office as a center of gravity. We're seeing other things that might make more sense as a center of gravity for law firms. Practice groups specifically. We're looking at practice groups and saying this is where we're spending most of our time, not in an office with people who might have different practices or different job roles than we have, but in the practice group where we have commonalities. So that's starting to become a new thing. It's a change that we've seen. And when I think about all these things that I've seen, and I think, and it's not just that, we're seeing generative AI, and it's not just that generative AI is on the horizon, it's here now. We're seeing firms starting to adopt it now. And I'm looking back on my career, and it's been 18 years that I've been working in law libraries, and I've seen all of these changes in 18 years. I've done print research, I've put CD-ROMs in computers, I've done all sorts of online legal research. And I wonder if there's ever been an 18-year time period that's had this much change in our jobs. If we went back to 1980, for example, and looked at how things changed from 1980 to 1998, my guess is the day-to-day tasks of the job were very, very similar. Yet here we are looking back to the start of my career in 2006 and where we are now, and we're looking at the difference between books and generative AI. So there's been a lot of change in these past 18 years, but there's a reason. And that reason, obviously, is technology is changing. And technology is changing because it makes things easier. It makes things more cost-effective. It makes things more efficient. So what does that mean for us? It means that we need to be dynamic. We need to be dynamic as individuals, and we need to be dynamic as departments. We need to make sure that we're changing as the technology is changing. How can we still be efficient and effective in our day-to-day jobs when the tasks of the jobs are almost entirely different than a few years ago or a few decades ago? And will the firm see that and understand it and appreciate the work that we're doing and how dynamic we are and learning all these different technologies and bringing these different technologies to the community that we're serving? And we're at a crossroads now. It's not the first, and it's probably not going to be the last, where generative AI is coming and other resources are changing. And centers of gravity in firms are changing. And in response to this, the firm that I work for, Troutman Pepper, has introduced and developed a new initiative, a practice liaison initiative to our Library and Research Services Department. And I'd like to talk today about the experience that we've had, the challenges, the successes, and everything else, and how you might be able to do something similar in your organization. So before I get too into the weeds, I do just want to give a quick overview of how large corporate law firms are organized for any of our friends and colleagues that might not work for a large corporate law firm. I know that we have a lot of different librarians here at academic law libraries and government law libraries and prison libraries and everything else. So just a quick overview. The way that law firms are typically organized, the large corporate law firms, is that there's two different branches within the firm. There's going to be, on the one hand, the law practice. This is where the attorneys sit. The attorneys are the ones who generate revenue for the firm. And on the other hand, you're going to have the administrative department. So this is where folks like me sit. We're the people who are support staff, who support those attorneys who are going out and generating revenue for the firm. And we're going to be organized into different departments. We're, of course, going to have a library department. We're going to have an accounting department, an HR department, an IT department, and everything else. And then similarly with the attorneys, they're going to be organized into departments that we call practice groups. And those practice groups are going to have attorneys who have similar practices. So, for example, you might have multiple attorneys who do mergers and acquisitions work. Those attorneys are going to be in the same practice group. One additional branch that we have is the practice department. And this is where we have practice groups that are similar, grouped together in practice departments. I don't know if other firms do that, but we do that here at Troutman Pepper, and it made things a lot easier for us when we started this practice liaison initiative. But there you go. There's your 10,000-foot view of law firms. So in preparation for this, one of the things I wanted to do was find a good quote or two to kind of get things started off with. So I was looking at some AA, LL spectrum issues and trying to find something that would be a good way to start this off. And I found this great article called "The Future of the Law Firm Library." And there were all sorts of great quotes in there. And I picked just these four. And I'm going to read the one at the top left. It says, "Librarians are indeed delivering the services that are needed by the firms, but the question is, do their employers know that?" And all of these quotes here kind of say something like that. Do our firms know what we're doing? Are we really helping them? Are we helping them to the best of our abilities? Are we helping them in a way that makes sense for their work? And again, it's called the future of the law firm library. The idea is looking forward. How are we going to develop in the future? But what's interesting about this is this article was published in 1996, September of 1996, which tells me that we have had these challenges for all these years, 28 years, if my math is right, 27 and a half maybe. But in any case, this is a challenge that we've had for many, many years. And it's a challenge that we have been talking about here at Troutman Pepper and trying to figure out how we can meet that challenge. And we've been, again, trying to meet the challenge for years throughout our profession. We've had some successes, some challenges, and sometimes, we work with attorneys who get it and they're really appreciative of what we do, and other times less so. We've tried things like embedded librarians, where you take a librarian out of the library department and put them into a practice group. And that's great because that practice group is really going to know what we're doing and really appreciate what we as librarians do. But at the same time, it's not perfect. It's still just one practice group. And on top of that, that librarian is no longer a representative of the library department. So our goal was to try and do something similar, but one, touch all practice groups at the firm, and two, make it so that they really would understand not just one of us individually, but the entire department, that they would know us and recognize us and value us and really see what our expertise is, because we are experts at legal research. I could walk down the hall here and find any number of attorneys who are far more of an expert than me when it comes to the practice of law. But I'd be surprised if any of them are better legal researchers than me. And I'd be very surprised if there are any attorneys out there who can out-research anybody on this call right now. We are experts, and we are valuable, and we are more valuable than any electronic tool or any automated tool. And as long as we can continue to be dynamic, then we'll continue to be more expert than those automated tools. And what we do is important to a law firm. It's tremendously important. We research information and knowledge. We make sure that the attorneys have the information that they need and the knowledge that they need to do their jobs. And the Practice Liaison Initiative is designed in large part to ensure that the firm recognizes that expertise. So how did we get started? We kicked off in spring of 2022, but the seeds were planted a lot earlier. We work with a consulting firm like many law firms do. I'm sure many of the folks here have worked with consulting firms in the past. We are a merged firm. In 2020, Troutman, Sanders, and Pepper Hamilton merged, and it made a lot of sense, a lot of business sense, but there were challenges, particularly for the administrative departments. All of a sudden, we have 2 HR departments and 2 IT departments and 2 library departments. So one of the things we needed to do was work with a consulting group to figure out how to work together as 2 departments and work within this new, larger framework of a large, much bigger law firm than any of us had worked in previously. And one of the big suggestions of that consulting firm was more collaboration with the practice groups. Another thing that happened around that time was the 2021 AALL virtual conference. Some of us went to that, and there were a lot of themes that were really present there that some of us really latched onto. And that included marketing ideas like outreach, a lot of different types of outreach, seeing if we could get into practice group meetings and other ways to really develop relationships with attorneys and practice groups as a whole, and also proactive research, things like that. And luckily for us, we did have a firm-wide initiative that was calling for increased collaboration between the practice groups and the administrative departments. Initially, it didn't include our department, but we had the idea of, hey, look, we see this initiative that's happening throughout the firm. We have this idea at the same time. Why don't we bring it to the leadership of the firm and see if they would buy into it? And of course, they did buy into it. They were, looking at the other administrative departments doing similar things, and we came to them with a plan, and they were very happy to oblige. So of course, we did some work on the back end to try and figure out how we wanted to do this, how many people we wanted involved, what the workload was going to be, things like that. And eventually in spring of 2022, we kicked off. We, again, have this model with practice departments, and that made things really easy. So instead of splitting up all these different practice groups to different practice liaisons in the library, we would only have 5 practice departments that we would split up between the practice liaisons. And we could do that based on experience that we have. So I've done a lot of tax research in my life. So we said, hey, look, I will take the practice department that has tax. And we wound up bringing somebody new on board because none of us had much IP research, but we brought on an IP specialist, somebody who had done a lot of IP research in her past. And all of a sudden we had specialties ready to go. And at that point, we put together a mission statement and some goals, and essentially our goals boiled down to these 3 things. 1, establishing relationships with the practice groups. 2, implementing programs and procedures for the attorneys at the firm. And 3, if we could be successful at these first 2 goals, then as a result, we would improve the visibility of the Library and Research Services Department throughout the firm. So, speaking to that first goal, establishing personal relationships. This was a big thing. We didn't really know exactly where to start, but we wanted to start reaching out to practice group leadership. Should we reach out to partners who are in charge? Should we reach out to practice directors? Should we reach out to practice coordinators, practice managers? Ultimately, it was this role of practice manager that wound up being very open to working with us. And it was something we didn't even know about, but this was a role in the firm that did a lot of work and does a lot of work, not just in the practice area, but throughout the firm, and becomes, a kind of a liaison from the practice group to other administrative departments through the firm. They also do like high level administrative work and things like that for the practice group itself. So that made a lot of sense. They were very eager to work with us. We did some kickoff calls with them, and everything got going. The next thing we wanted to do was see if we could get invited to practice group meetings. We thought this was really important because we understood what our practice groups did, or at least we thought we understood what our practice groups did. But we weren't coming from a place with a ton of knowledge of what the practice groups do, right? We're looking at research requests coming in and saying, well, okay, we understand what they do based on the research requests. Or we could look at the public-facing website and understand what the practice group does based on what the website is saying. But we're still not understanding what the day-to-day work is, or maybe what their large long-term goals are. If we're in those practice group meetings, even just as a fly on the wall, we're starting to understand that day-to-day work more. And we're starting to understand those long-term goals more. And then on top of that, if we get a chance to speak in these practice group meetings, now we can start showing them who we are. They've only seen our names in emails on research requests, but now all of a sudden we can talk to them and they hear our voices and they see our faces. And again, we're not in offices with many of these people. So they were only seeing our names in emails, and now they can finally see who we are. And I'm out here in California, and some of these attorneys are in Atlanta or Philadelphia or New York or whatever else. And now we know each other. We recognize each other's faces. Another thing that's kind of related to that is being included in practice group wide emails. So an email that goes out to an entire practice group not only is going to the attorneys in that group, but it's going to a lot of the support staff in that group. And now I'm included in that support staff. So I can see the things that they're talking about amongst themselves to help learn more about the practice group. And then once we've done that, we're starting to establish relationships with the attorneys and with the other practitioners. And we're talking to them and they're getting to know us. And we're talking about ourselves and we're talking about our department. So they start learning not only about us as practice liaisons, but about the department and about the research team. And the research team is an expert team of legal researchers. And we've all known attorneys who are great at working with us. And we've all known attorneys who maybe aren't so great at working with us. And now they get a better idea of who we are, not just the liaisons, but the entire team. Okay, so the second goal, implementing programs and procedures, outreach, that kind of thing. The first thing we wanted to do was get an onboarding program going. Our onboarding program was a little bit lacking, and we kind of said, let's kind of go back to the drawing board and see what we can do. So we had a few ideas. We wanted to get a welcome email out. Hey, we're the library. We'd love to meet with you. We're going to follow up with your credentials. And then we would send an email with some credentials. And then we would get together for a one-on-one orientation where we could meet the person, obviously through Zoom or Teams most of the time. And we would also do some follow-up emails, a 3-month follow-up and a one-year follow-up. And one of the most important things about this is we decided to make it practice group focused. Again, there used to be a time where we would do orientations based on people who were working within the office. So I sit in the San Francisco office. Is there going to be a new attorney in the San Francisco office? Well, I'll meet with that person. I'm not going to meet with the person in the Chicago office. But now that things are getting more and more practice focused, it made more sense to do orientations based on practice groups. The second type of program that we wanted to get going was a training program. We had lots of different ideas and lots of different things that we threw out there. We thought about what we wanted to teach, how we wanted to teach. We wanted to make sure that attorneys knew who we were and how to work with us. We wanted to make sure that they knew what resources are available to them, how to use those resources, and which resources to use for which types of work. We thought about research efficiency across the firm, when it would make more sense for attorneys maybe to do the work on their own, or maybe when it would make more sense for them to send something to us. And ultimately, we came to 3 types of training sessions. First would be standalone sessions that are led by the vendor. So you bring a vendor in and say, hey, can you speak to our attorneys and talk about your product? And those are useful and helpful. I think we've all been doing those for years and years, and they're great, right? The attorney or the vendor knows about their product. They're experts on their product, so they can come in and talk about their product. The next thing would be to have us, the practice liaisons, do training sessions, standalone sessions. We're going to send out an email. Here's a calendar invite. Hope you can make it. We will teach you about the different resources out there. And then the third would be sessions within practice group meetings. So this would be meetings where, the practice group is getting together and they're looking for content, and we would say, hey, look, if you need some content, we're happy to sit in on the meeting and explain to you about this tool, or maybe multiple tools, or maybe how to research a certain thing that comes up regularly. The next thing that we wanted to do was put some reference guides together. And the idea here is PDFs or some kind of documentation saying, this is a tool you have access to, this is what it's used for, this is how to use it. And not just a single tool. We could compare tools and contrast different tools and maybe say, hey, look, you work in this practice group. Here are all the different resources that are relevant for you. We're going to compare and contrast them for you. We're going to show you what the strengths are, what the unique things are of those of certain particular tools. And lastly, we have a wonderful intranet here. There's so much there, not just for our department, throughout the entire firm. But we wanted to make sure that what we were doing is reflected on the intranet, and that our intranet site would be useful and available to all of the attorneys here. So we thought about taking our training programs, recording them, putting links to them so our attorneys could watch them on demand from our intranet. We also started putting reference guides into the training section of our intranet. And then we've also had this program for a long time in our department where we have practice-specific research resources lists. So you go to our intranet and you go to your practice group and click on that link, and it will list a curated list that we've put together of all sorts of resources that we think are relevant for the practice area. While our team didn't put together those lists to begin with, we are managing that, we're maintaining it, making sure the links are current and active, making sure that all relevant resources are included, and things like that. So we have a very vibrant and robust intranet going at this point. So in terms of the third goal, it's a little bit different. The first two goals are a little more action-based, a little more task-based. Let's do this, let's do that. The idea with this third goal, improving the visibility of the Library and Research Services Department throughout the firm, is more like, hey, if we were successful at those first two goals, if we were able to develop relationships with the practice groups, and if we were able to implement effective programs and procedures for working with the attorneys, then we would achieve this third goal, improving the visibility of our department throughout the firm. So, have we been successful? These are kind of the big measures of success in my mind. Is there increased recognition of the Library and Research Services Department? Are we seen as a trusted partner and resource throughout the firm? And is there knowledge throughout the firm of what we do and how we can help? These are really tough things to measure. At the same time, I do think we have been successful. I have talked to people who have mentioned that we've made a difference in these past couple of years. And there was one person who gave me a great quote. She said, and this is a person who's been with the firm for many, many years. And she said, recognition of the value for the library has gone up. Visibility of the library has gone way up. The department and the team members are now more known. So even though we might not be able to measure these things specifically, there are times where we do get some good positive feedback that tells me that we are being successful. But what about things that we can actually measure? Well, we've been doing this for 2 years. And as far as I know, we haven't received any real criticism from the powers that be at the firm. So that's a great sign. In terms of the outreach programs, the training programs specifically, we have done a ton of these over the past couple of years. And we've learned a lot over these past couple of years. When it comes to the standalone sessions, I think I mentioned earlier that we've been doing this, not just me, not just my firm, but all library departments across firms have been doing this for years and years, decades. Let's bring in the vendor, and the vendor will explain how to use the tool. And it tends to be useful. There are some people who are interested. There are some people who tend to come, and it tends to be the same people a lot of the time. But it can be a challenge to get people to come to these standalone sessions. Attorneys have a lot on their plate. Attorneys have enormous requirements to meet billable hour requirements, to meet pro bono requirements, article writing, right? All these different things that they're trying to do. And to get them to take time out of their day to come to a training session can be a little tricky. But I'm happy to report that we have had 275 unique attendees in 2023 and 78 unique attendees so far in 2024, and that's at least through March. So we're going in the right direction. But how about these vendor-led sessions versus practice liaison-led sessions? How have those worked? What we've kind of found is that with the vendors, they're great. They know their tools. They know their tools inside and out. But at the same time, they can also use these sessions as an opportunity to promote their tools. They're not going to come into these sessions and say, these are the strengths and weaknesses of our tools, or this is how our tool compares to our competitor's tool. If we can do the session on our own, even though we might not be as expert as the vendors, we're still pretty good at using these tools, pretty darn good, really. But we can start doing those other things where we're comparing them to each other. We're saying, hey, look, this tool is great, but it might lack a little bit in this regard, or there might be another tool that's a little bit better. You might want to try that one out instead. Another thing that's really helped with the training sessions is being included in the practice group meetings and having more knowledge of the practice groups and what they do. As an example, there were 3 separate practice groups where I went to their meetings, and this was sometime late last year, let's say like October, November, December, something like that. 3 different practice group meetings for 3 separate practice groups. And for all 3 of these practice groups, the same attorney came to speak to them about this new law. It's called the Corporate Transparency Act. I think it became effective on January 1st of this year. And this person came in, did a great job presenting about the Corporate Transparency Act. I learned a lot about it, but one thing that I realized is this is something that's covering multiple practice areas here at our firm. And this person, the presenter, didn't once speak to research resources. So that tells me not only is this important to the firm, but it's important across multiple practice groups. And these attorneys who are learning about it might not know about the resources that are available for it. So I did a little work on my own, looking at what might be out there, what resources touch on this. And I put together a little training program for it. And I'm very happy to say that that was my most successful training program. I had a lot of attendees for that one who were really interested in what research resources are available to them related to this brand new important act. As far as training in the practice group meetings go, that is the best in my experience. And the reason why is now we're not sending a calendar invite out and saying, hey, can you take time out of your day to come to our session? We are going to their session. We're going to a meeting where the attorneys in that practice group are required to go. So we have a built-in audience. And oftentimes it's a captive audience. I'm attending these meetings on my computer, but I'm looking at the little Zoom box where you can see the little heads of everybody who's in the meeting, and sometimes it's not an individual. Sometimes it's a meeting room, and there are 5, 6, 7, 8, a dozen attorneys sitting in that meeting room, listening to this practice group meeting, and none of them are able to alt tab over to another screen and start working on billable work. They're stuck listening to me so I can get through to them and I can talk to them about things that I think are going to be relevant to them. How about the onboarding program? I think that's been a tremendous success so far. We've been doing this since I think summer of 2022 is when we kicked off our our new onboarding program. We've only had one attorney who said, no, I don't need to meet with you. So I think it winds up being a 99% positive attendance rate. And generally we do get positive feedback after we do that. I think I mentioned this earlier, but we do follow-up emails at the 3-month mark and the 1-year mark, with the idea being, hey, this person has just started with the firm, and even at 3 years or 3 months or even 1 year, they're still kind of learning the ropes. And don't forget that when we're doing these training sessions, these orientation sessions, the content we're providing, we're really familiar with it. So it seems good and fine and normal, but it is pretty dense. And you're bombarding them with information. And not only that, but they're doing lots of different orientations during that first week that they're with the firm. So having that follow-up email a couple of months down the road winds up being really helpful for them, where they can say, oh, yes, I do remember this person. I do want to follow up with this person and talk to them again. I did have a question that came up. So we've had a lot of really positive experience with those follow-up emails. Being a point of contact for practice group leadership. This is another thing that I think we've been successful at. I have a couple of great examples of things that have happened. A practice manager reached out to me couple of months ago and said, hey, so and so sent me an email and wanted me to do a survey for all the attorneys in this practice group to see what research resources they're using. And I think you can get metrics for that. I'm not sure, but can you? And I said, well, yeah, I definitely can. And I put together a nice report and I sent it off to that practice manager. And that saved not only a ton of time for the practice manager, not having to put together this stupid survey, but it also saved a lot of time for the attorneys who would have had to answer that survey, would have had to take time out of their day to say, yeah, I use this resource, that resource, and I don't really use these other two. We could just go ahead and look at the metrics and get that and send it directly to the practice manager, who can send it to whoever is interested. Another great example is I had a couple of partners in another practice group reach out to me and say, hey, look, we subscribe to this one big tool and there's this one module in there that we think we might be interested in. Could you get a trial going for us? And of course we did, but it makes me wonder, if it wasn't for me, are they going to know to reach out to the library? I hope they would. They probably would, but maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would reach out to the wrong department, or maybe they would just throw their hands up and say, I don't know who to ask about this. Forget it. Or worst of all, maybe they would reach out directly to the vendor, and then that's going to create headaches for all of us. Oh, in any case, I think we have become a great point of contact for practice group leadership. We've also looked at metrics of our research requests and metrics of our resource usage, and we've seen some changes in these past couple of years. We are a firm that gets lots and lots and lots of document pull requests. Attorneys will come to us and say, hey, can you pull this article? Can you pull this, this docket, this case, whatever? And that's great. We're happy to do that. And of course, we know where to go for those things. But our research team is experts at doing legal research, not at just saving a PDF of some article, right? So I think we've been able to convey to our attorneys what they have access to, and thereby they're going to know it's going to be easier for them just to go to that website and grab that article themselves, rather than taking the time to send us an email and waiting for us to get back to them with a PDF of that article. It's going to save our team time, our research team time, because now they're not going to have to take time away from that research project they're working on to do document pulls. And that's not to say that we're not doing document pulls. We're still doing a ton, but it's gone down. The other thing that's important to note is that our resource usage has gone up. And this is important. We're seeing more usage of our resources, particularly with our specialty resources, and not just more usage, but deeper usage and usage that we weren't seeing before. And that's important. Resources are expensive. If our attorneys and our people are using our resources more and using them more deeply, then we're going to start to get a much better value for our subscription dollar. Okay, so if you're thinking about maybe doing something similar in your organization, I've been thinking about how I might start something new. If I was going to start a new practice liaison program, what would I do? What would I be thinking about? Well, first and foremost, building those relationships. Relationship building is important in life, not just in law firm libraries, not just in our careers, but throughout life, but especially in our careers. You need to know the community that you are serving. They need to know you. There needs to be trust. There needs to be understanding of what they are expert at and what we are expert at. And I know that this can be challenging for librarians. A lot of librarians are very introverted. But in my experience, and I think I'm introverted too, but in my experience, when I've tried to reach out to people, I've gotten a lot of positivity. People are very happy to hear from me when I've reached out and said, hey, I'm here to help. All of a sudden they say, well, this is somebody else who can make my job a little bit easier. That being said, it's still important to have the right people to do the job. There are going to be some librarians who will have a prohibitively difficult time reaching out. So it is important to have the right people. Secondly, attendance at relevant meetings. This is like the fifth time I've talked about practice group meetings, I know, but they are very important to get to know people, to learn more about people, learn more about practices. And it's not just practice group meetings here at law firms. It's whatever organization you are with. If you can get closer to your community and understand their needs more, that's going to make a big, big difference. Of course, getting the buy-in from your leadership is important. Again, we had a great opportunity where we knew the leadership at our firm wanted to have more collaboration between the administrative departments and the practice groups. But even if you don't have something like that, I think any reasonable organization would be willing to hear a pitch for a liaison program because of how potentially effective it can be. I keep talking about how this kind of liaison program helps us and helps our department, but it also helps the entire firm because now they know more about us. Now they're more connected to us. Now they're more willing to reach out to that person who can help them, who they weren't aware of before. And of course, we always need to be flexible. All organizations are different. I keep talking about what's worked for us. These things might not work for your organization. And we're still in a pilot phase of this program. As far as I know, we're the only firm that has done exactly what we've done with this practice liaison initiative. I think other firms have done similar things, but still, it is a pilot phase, and we're still trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So if something isn't working, don't be afraid to move on to the next thing. And likewise, if something else starts naturally developing, roll with it. If there's some need for something that you weren't anticipating, keep working with it. You know, you have an opportunity there. And of course, understand that there will be challenges. I do office hours once a month, and they tend to be very, very sparsely attended. On the other hand, I do get a lot of work done during those office hours, but I would much rather have people there during those office hours asking me questions and asking me how they can use our services and things like that. Okay, so where does this leave us? Where are we now, and where will we be in the future? As far as law firms go, a liaison program, whether it's as detailed as ours or even just some minor outreach program, is pivotal. It's our best bet to solving this issue that's been dogging us all these years. Who are you? What do you do? Why should I take time out of my day to work with you? How are you able to help me? Why should the organization support your department? And why should the organization fund your department? This role serves as a bridge. It fosters relationships and collaboration between the library and the rest of the firm. It allows us to engage with our community so we can showcase our value and demonstrate our capabilities. It ensures that our users know that we're not just a repository of information, but a dynamic, interactive, expert, and indispensable source of information for the firm. And again, I keep talking about how this is going to help us, but it helps the firm as a whole. It contributes to the firm's overall success. With the Practice Liaison program, the attorneys of the firm are going to know what resources are available to them, what resources might be available to the librarians at the firm. It's going to help them know what those resources are used for. It's going to help them know how to use those resources. And most importantly, it's going to help them know how our department can help them accomplish their practice goals. And again, we're seeing the impending application of generative AI in our organizations. And a practice liaison initiative is going to help the firm know to work with us in order to get the best possible usage out of generative AI. Generative AI isn't going to do the work on its own. It's going to need us to help. And we're firmly in this era where knowledge and information are tremendously important, and we are the ones who do the research to get that information and knowledge out there. With that in mind, the practice liaison role can help a library department reach that elusive goal of showing the firm how essential we really are. It'll help guide and teach users about how to gather and understand information and knowledge, how to use our resources, our services, and our expertise, and how users can get the most out of the library service in order to help accomplish their goals and the goals of the entire organization. The library department is not just a source of information, but an expert partner in driving information to revenue earners throughout the firm, and an expert partner in the organization being successful. And the practice liaison role is the chief force of the firm understanding that. Thank you all for your time. I know I'm right at the limit. I was hoping I could have some time for questions and answers, but I see it is 15 minutes to the top of the hour. But again, thank you. Appreciate your time, everybody. Thanks, April.
Thank you so much, Ryan. If anybody wants to very quickly jump off mute or throw a question into the chat, this has been wildly I was going to say informal, informative.
We want to be informal too. That's okay.
Oh, that's great. I did want to know what you considered to be the biggest hurdle of getting buy-in from leadership in the practice groups in your program.
So for us, there was already a firm-wide initiative calling for this sort of thing. So it was something that I think they were very willing to go along with. That said, for anybody who's worked at a law firm, people at the highest end of the law firm, whether it's partners or whether it's, chief level folks, they can be intimidating, and they try to be intimidating a lot of the time. And they really want to make sure that you know your stuff. And I think that we saw some of that where, we did get grilled about what can you do? Why should we support this? Why should we fund this? That's probably all I could speak to on that. But yeah, again, we did have kind of luck into a great situation where people were interested in what we were trying to pitch to them.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again so much for your time. That, again, was a phenomenal presentation. We are going to be going on a break and come back for AI prompting, which is, I believe, our last session. Please remember to stand, give a big stretch, vocalize something, and we will see you back at the top of the hour.